Hey art nerds, we are back with another figure drawing study. Today we are drawing two people in a fighting pose. And again, I am using reference from SenshiStock. You can find links in the description below where you can find SenshiStock poses, their pose timer, and you can support their work. So for this image, it's really important that I get my placement down early. So I draw two lines of action and I begin blocking in the figures. You guys may have noticed that I've progressed a little bit more from using a rectangular shape to more of an hourglass shape to capture the female form. As you become comfortable with figure drawing, you're going to find your own shorthand that works. It's also really important that I block in the arms because the arms are where the two figures are actually connecting, and even though the legs are what's carrying the weight, the arms are what's interacting, so that kind of placement's really important. Unfortunately, I placed these figures just a little bit close. That's one of the problems with working with traditional media. I didn't realize it until it was a little bit too late. If I were working digitally, I would edge one of the characters over just a little bit because their arms are not really supposed to be interacting quite like that, and I would have liked more room to sketch in the legs. So you can see I have the basic pose sketched in, no heads, no hands, no feet. So now we're going to start fleshing things in. We're figuring out where the rib cage and the torso goes. This is somewhat of a down shot, and the characters are kipped somewhat towards the viewer. So you can see more the tops of the shoulders and more of the top of the rib cage than you can of the underside. The arms are also blocking a lot of the torso. This is one of those poses where I know if I redrew it, it would look so much better. In fact, I thought about doing that on camera to show you guys how redrawing and revising can be beneficial. And maybe I'll do that in an upcoming video. So I'm fleshing in the torsos as well as the arms and the hands, trying to figure out the placement, trying to block everything in. This also might have been a good opportunity to pull out the old tracing paper. I could have blocked each one in on the tracing paper, moving them over just a little bit, and then redrawn the whole thing. And most of these shapes are just very basic placeholder shapes so I can figure everything out. So now I have the top half of the torso blocked out somewhat. Now I'm refining the shoulders just a little bit. I realized the arms weren't really where they were in the photo. I'm also kind of blocking in the legs, figuring out the stance. I know I should have probably drawn them just a smidge higher on the paper as I'm running out of room at the bottom, but I managed to get everything in. When in doubt, just work with a larger sheet of paper. Now I had some trouble blocking in her legs and her pelvis, and it wasn't because she's wearing shorts. That wasn't really the issue. I think it's because I placed the two figures too close together and I really needed more room for the leg that is closest to the other person. That really should be extended out a little bit more. I'm also blocking in the feet using wedge shapes. They're wearing heels in the reference, which I'm going to capture in this sketch. Now I'm blocking in the heads. I really like this pose because we see the tops of the heads rather than the faces, and this is something I've been wanting to practice more, is posing my heads in interesting and dynamic ways. For a while, I've been working on using my hands and arms to also tell the story, but I find that I tend to pose my characters facing forward or at 3/4 view way too often. So practicing other views is really good because it adds more to my visual vocabulary, and I'm more likely to try new things if I've practiced it. You can see here that the arms are really not where they should be, and I kind of figured that out as I'm drawing in her torso because the view, what you can see in my drawing versus what you can see in the actual reference is a little bit different, and that kind of bugs me. Also wanted to capture the dynamism of the legs to show them kind of taking the weight of the people and also flexed into the pose. And then she's sort of larger and maybe a little bit blockier. So I wanted to capture that. She's also flexing in to sort of defend or maybe hook with her elbow. And I feel like some of that thrust movement is lost in my sketch. I think if I went with something a little more gestural, I could capture that better. So perhaps in an upcoming tutorial, I'll show you guys how we can go from doing a more realistic figure study to a very gestural figure study so we can actually figure out the movements of the characters, which I think is really helpful for animators and people who do comics. Because it's all about that storytelling, and capturing the gesture is the essence of telling story with character acting. I'm also not a fan of how I drew the arms here because in silhouette, the arm movement just gets entirely lost. However, the leg movements would be very clear in silhouette, so I do like how the legs are posed. You can see here that the feet are just way too close compared to the reference. It's important to take stock of what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, so you can make note of what to change next time. That's what you should be thinking about. Don't get discouraged if this time didn't turn out the way you wanted. Think about how you can improve it for your next go round. So I've zoomed in so you guys can see me fleshing in the faces, especially since this is an unusual view, and as always I apologize that my hand is kind of obscuring the action. So for this person, her eyebrows are kind of covering her eyes, or rather her brow ridge is covering her eyes. So I wanted to make sure I captured that. I also wanted to capture the placement of her hairline so I can better remember that in the future. So I'm not so tied to one specific pose. And with her eyeline is almost entirely obscured. I did think it was important to capture the nose on both of them since that is what's protruding from the brow line. And I just used kind of a simple triangle to note that. I pull out again so that I can do some shading detail. As I've discussed in other videos, working on how light hits the human form has been one of the parts of this exercise, one of the important parts of study. I'm also detailing in their hands. You saw that I kind of gesturally roughed them in. Really all I have to do is kind of sketch in fingers. When you think of hands as sort of blocks or shapes that you can rough in, I think they become much more manageable. And as I'm adding shading, all of my errors, all the ways I didn't quite capture it are becoming apparent. That's why I said this would have been a good one to do a redraw on, but I think I'm going to save that for a later date to show you guys. Maybe instead of doing two people, I'll do one person in a more complicated pose. However, it's another figure study done in around 10 minutes. When I'm drawing two people, I don't worry about getting it finished in 10 minutes. I aim for 15. Alright, so that is today's sketch. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Hopefully I'll see you guys again really soon. Have a great day, guys. Bye!